Good morning, everybody, and lovely to see you all. While we're just waiting for the last people to enter from the waiting room, I want to say good morning, Zalman Feiglin. Lovely to see you there. Thanks for helping your mum come in and join us for the learning. It's great to see you. Always good to see you. And hello to your Auntie Debbie as well. Good to see you. Welcome from America, I believe. And Mazel Tov for the Simcha you traveled for. When's the Simcha, Debbie? Sorry, you're on mute, but I think I lip read that you said 3 weeks.
Yeah, today 3 weeks.
Wow, fantastic. Well, it's great to see you there and everybody else as well. Let's get going. Re'eh is a big parsha. And Kli Yakar on the Re'eh has a lot to teach us. So I'm going to mute everybody. Feel free to unmute yourselves when you wish to join in. And let's get going. Source number 1. Re'eh anochi noten lefnechem hayom bracha uklala. Our parsha commences. See, I place before you today blessing and curse. And the word hayom here is an interesting word. I mean, they're all interesting words. Because if this is a reference to the brachot and klalot, which we are going to receive only later on in Har Grizim and Har Eival, why does it say hayom? The Kli Yakar discusses that, but he didn't quite make the crack for what we're going to be seeing in the Kli Yakar today. But there's a very big statement here that Hashem encourages us to use our free will, and he tells us that he places before us a choice. The choice is between blessing and curse. And the Kli Yakar in source number 2 points out similarly to a grammatical point he made in last week's parsha. He says, Re'eh. The first word of this week's parsha is Re'eh, k'medaber liyachid, addressing the individual. It's Re'eh, not Re'u. Lifnechem, and then it goes on and it says, before you, plural, k'medaber l'rabim, addressing the plural. So what's going on? Surely it should have been Re'u anochi noten lifnechem hayom, or Re'eh anochi noten lefanecha. Why does it jump within the space of just a few words from addressing the individual to addressing plural? And he goes on to say, based on the Gemara in Kiddushin, Lefisha Amru Chazal, because our sages told us, Le'olam yidamel adam ki'ilu haya kol ha'olam mechza al mechza zchuyot va'avanot. A person should always imagine as if the entire world is perfectly poised, 50-50, zchuyot and avanot, merits and sins. Asa mitzvah achat, all you have to do is one mitzvah, then you yourself have the balance in the right direction, and the whole world as well has a majority of merit over sin. And therefore this parasha commences by addressing every individual individual. Re'eh, you as an individual person must understand that he should internalize that the individual's actions have an impact on everybody, on the collective. The individual must understand that their personal choices make a difference to the lives of other people as well. In our current circumstances, we don't need many great examples. It's obvious in our faces how individual choices can have such a detrimental impact on other individuals and their lives, or how individual choices, if they make the right choices, can have a positive impact in looking after the lives of others. Those are the opening words of the parasha. The individual should understand that their decisions have an impact on the blessing and the curse of the collective. Now that's a lovely message, but why does it appear now at the beginning of Parashat Re'eh? And the Kli Yakar goes on to understand the context. This is mentioned in this week's parsha. Which will talk about Har Grizim and Har Eival. It is on Har Grizim and Har Eival where we all become intertwined and we all become responsible for each other. And therefore, umitzad ha'arevot, it's a lovely concept, kol Yisrael arevim zeh bazeh, or kol Yisrael arevim zeh lazeh. We're all responsible for each other. But also there's a downside to it, a potential downside, which is that because all of our fates are intertwined, we have a common fate and a common destiny, rabim nitvasim ba'avon hayachid, many people can be held responsible for the individual sin. So if Har Grizim and Har Eival is all about our common responsibility for each other, it is in that context where individuals are warned and reminded of their individual responsibility. And then he goes on to say that this is hinted at in a midrash at the beginning of this week's parsha. And the hint is not obvious. And in source number 3, we're going to learn the midrash and understand where the Kliya got this from. Because he says here in the final paragraph of source 2, V'yesh kidmut remez lezeh. He says there's a bit of a hint towards this. Mashemesik biyalkud, that which is concluded in the midrash. B'tchilat parsha zoh, the beginning of this week's parsha, where it gives us a mashal, a parable. Lechad shehaya yoshev al prashat drachim, a person was sitting at a crossroads. V'hayu lefanav shnei shvilin, and there were 2 paths open before them. And we're going to learn that mashal in a moment. And he says, Hitchil bedrachim hakvoshim larabim, v'siyem b'shvilin hakvoshin liyichedim. You know what? Let's jump to source number 3. Let's learn the midrash, and then we're going to come back to see what the Kli Yakar says about it. Because the Kli Yakar believes that source number 3 contains within it a hint to this concept of communal responsibility for the actions of the individual. Bracha u'klala, this is the midrash. Lama ne'emar, what's going on here? You see, Hashem has told us, I'm placing before you options, life and death, blessing and curse. Shema yumu Israel, so maybe the Jews will come along and say, listen, Hashem's given us 2 options. Derech HaChayim, v'derech HaMavet. He says, if you want, you can choose Chayim. If you want, you can choose Mavet. We have free will, so we can do what we like. Some people may interpret the concept of free will that Hashem has given us to mean that we can make the wrong decision. Talmud Lomar, that's why the Torah also tells us, Uvacharta b'chayim, you should choose life. So Hashem gives us free will, but he also tells us what to choose. Now you might think to yourself, surely that's obvious then. If Hashem tells us what to choose, it should be obvious. But the reality is we only have to look at our own lives. Not your old tzaddikim, but for myself and for the bad people around. We only have to look at our own lives to realize that we don't always make the right decisions. But if Hashem has given us a choice and he's told us which decision to make, why is it so difficult sometimes to make the right decisions? And he goes on to say, I'm just going to disable annotation, which I've done, and he goes on to say, Mashal la'adam shayoshev b'parshat drachim, the mashal of an individual who's sitting at a crossroads. V'hayu lefanav shnei shvilin, and there were 2 paths in front of him. Echad shetchilato mishor v'sofo kotzim, one path started off nice and plainly, but it ended up covered in thorns. V'echad shetchilato kotzim v'sofo mishor, and one which started off in thorns, but if you go on the path for a bit, it'll end up being a very pleasant path to walk on. So somebody's standing there at these crossroads, and when people come, he tells them, do you see this nice looking path, the attractive path for you to choose? After just a few steps along this path, so Folat said, Kotzim, it's going to be a horribly painful path for you to choose. You're going to be walking on thorns. Do you see this path covered in thorns? After 2 or 3 steps walking on these thorns, it'll end up being a pleasant path to walk on. And then the Midrash gives the Nimshal. Kach amar lahen Moshe liYisrael. Therefore Moshe tells the Jews, you look at the path chosen by the wicked and you see them being successful for a period of time. Maybe in this world they're successful, but eventually they're going to be pushed aside. You see righteous people who suffer in this world. Well, that's just like a few days in the bigger picture. They suffer. Ultimately, they will rejoice. As it says, to make things good for you at the end. In other words, why is it so difficult for us to make the right decisions? The answer is because while Hashem places before us the path of good and the path of bad, often the path of bad is more attractive than the path of good. And in the short term, it is more attractive or more convenient. And sometimes in our own minds, it makes sense to choose the path which goes against the path that Hashem has told us to choose. Therefore, Hashem stands there at the crossroads. And Hashem tells us, I'm giving you free will, and I'm telling you, choose this path. The one which in the short term might appear less comfortable. The one which in the short term might appear less attractive, but ultimately that is the right path to choose. That is the Midrash at the beginning of this week's Parsha. According to the Kli Yakar, this Midrash, which is a lovely Midrash, hints towards the concept that he started the Parsha with, that every individual is responsible for the community. Now, how on earth, that they're both beautiful concepts. The concept that the individual is responsible for the community is great. And the concept that we need to choose the uncomfortable path, which is the true path, is also great. But how does the Mashal teach us that which the Kli Yakar says? So let's go back to the Kli Yakar in source number 2 and look at how he really carefully reads this Midrash. And he says, in our Midrash, we have a Mashal, a parable. Someone is standing at a crossroads and he has 2 shvilin in front of him. The Kli Yakar pays attention. Hitchil bedrachim. The word for a crossroads is parshat drachim, where drachim diverge. Hakvoshin l'rabim. Drachim are highways. They're public highways. A derech is a major public thoroughfare or road. But then it talks about the shvil, a path which is about individuals. Therefore, this midrash is in the context of our midrash, our parsha, which starts off addressing the individual and the plural, for the reason which has been given. So let's look at source number 3 again. The source number 3, it says, Mashal la'adam, the parable in the Midrash is of someone, Shehaya Yoshev al Parshat Drachim. He was sitting at a major junction. Parshat Drachim. Drachim means the place where many people travel one way or the other. Parshat Drachim describes the fate of a large number of individuals. And what does he need to choose, this individual? V'ahiu lefanav Shnei Shvilin. And he had before himself 2 paths, meaning for the individual to influence this Parshat Drachim, really what they need to choose between is 2 Shvilin, 2 individual paths. The individual's choice of path will have an influence on the great highways and the Parshat Drachim and on absolutely everybody. And just really paying attention, a really, really careful and nuanced reading of the Midrash, the Kli Yakar suggests that this Midrash makes the same point from the beginning of Parshat Re'eh. It is all about how the individual has a responsibility to acknowledge and understand that their individual decisions will have an impact on the collective. Let's move on to the next thing in the Kli Yakar. Source number 4. Just before we get there, I'm going to... Let's see if that works. I'm just going to clean the screen. It'll take just a moment. Share screen. And here we go. Source number 4. We're now going to play a game of spot the difference. Let's pay attention to the way in which the bracha is presented to us and the way in which the klala is presented to us in source number 4. Because the parsha goes on to say, Et habracha, the blessing, asher tishma'u el mitzvot Hashem Elokeichem, when you listen to the mitzvot of Hashem, your God, asher anochi metzaveh etchem hayom, that I command you today. V'haklala, and the curse, im lo tishma'u el mitzvot Hashem Elokeichem, if you don't listen to the mitzvot of Hashem, your God, V'sartem min haderech, and you go off the derech, asher anochi metzaveh etchem hayom, that I command you today. Lalechet acharei Elohim acherim, to go after other gods, asher lo yadatem, that you did not know. So when we're playing Spot the Difference, first of all, we've got the phrases in yellow. When it comes to keeping the brachot, we're told that when you keep the brachot, when you listen to the brachot, it's a statement of asher. When it comes to the klalot, it doesn't say when you misbehave, it says im lo tishma'u, if you don't listen. So when it comes to the brachot, it's a more definitive statement than with the klalot. Also, I mean, just visually, Pasuk Kaf Chet is much longer than Pasuk Kaf Zayin, the second one here, because the klala has many more details. When it comes to the brachot, it says the brachot when you listen to Hashem. When it comes to the klalot, it says the klalot if you don't listen and you go off the derech and you go after the other gods. It goes into far greater detail. Why is there such a difference between the brachot and the klalot? And at the top of page 2, the Kli Yakar will start off by pointing out these differences, and then he'll explain. Et habracha shetishmu, etc. He says you should know in general in the Torah. B'chol makom sheizkir hashmiya. Whenever the Torah references listening to Hashem, yesh acharav asiyah v'shmira. Listening is presented in the context of action and keeping, or avodah, or worship, or actually doing it. For example, in last week's parsha it says, "Vaya ekev tishme'un," if you listen, etc. Ushmartem va'asitem, you will keep and you will perform. Also in last week's parsha, Vayayim shamo, if you will listen, it also says ule ovdo, and to worship Hashem. So the Kli Yakar starts off by saying, listening to Hashem, generally speaking, does not appear in isolation. We're told about listening to Hashem and keeping the mitzvot. Why? Listening is only about accepting things in your thoughts. It's an intention that you're going to do it. Nevertheless, it's not enough to listen to Hashem. You also have to do it. It's all very well and good. I mean, in my home, this wouldn't happen, but in some homes, the husband has to listen to the wife, and they also have to do that which the wife wants them to do. It's not just enough to listen. In my home, obviously, I both listen and perform. But then, sheken ne'emar, here, that's the way it appears with the klala. V'haklala im lo tishmu, if you don't listen, v'sartem, and you also have to go off the derech. So, the second pasuk we saw in source number 4 over here follows the general pattern. The klala is if you don't listen, and you go off the derech, and you do the wrong thing, it's about your intentions and your actions. But now we've got to ask a question, therefore, on pasuk Chaf Zayin, where it only talks about listening and nothing else. V'imken kasher, Therefore, we have a question. Havalei lomar, in the first pasuk of source 4, it should have said, Et habracha shetishmu, when you listen, v'halachtem bedrachav, and then when you go in Hashem's ways and you actually follow the mitzvot, then you get the brachot. V'chiyesh dai b'shmiya levado, levad b'lo asiyah, is it enough just to listen? So why is only listening mentioned when it comes to the brachot? And he goes on to say, V'hinei sana einecha ura'ei. Mashekatavnu lamala parshat Lech Lecha. He says, pay attention to what we said in Parshat Lech Lecha, and we'll have a reminder of it now. But Mashen Emar, when it says there, Va'avarcha mevarechecha umekalelcha aor. Hashem says, I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you shall be cursed. Now note, in the first phrase, Hashem says, I will bless the blessers. In the second phrase, the order is reversed. Those who curse you, or I will curse. The order is reversed. Why? Why does Hashem blessing come before the people who bless us? When it comes to positive intentions, the Torah considers our positive intentions as if we have already performed that which we are intending to do. When it comes to bad intentions, Hashem does not attach our negative intentions to action. And therefore, this week's parasha all makes sense. When will we be cursed? Not only when we don't listen and we have the wrong intentions, it's when we actually physically go ahead and do the wrong thing, because the punishment for doing bad things will only come if we actually do the wrong thing. The blessing we will receive the moment we've listened and we have positive intentions, Hashem will consider it as if we've actually done the right thing. Why? Because this blessing which we receive for our positive intentions will help us. So that we'll be able to deliver on those positive intentions by clearing away any potential barriers along the way. It's an unfair system and it's twisted in our favor. You see, if you plan to do something bad and you don't actually do something bad, you're only going to be punished if you actually do that which is bad. If you plan to do something good, even if you haven't yet delivered on it, you will be rewarded as if you've already done it, and that reward will help you achieve it. And therefore, looking back at source number 4, the bracha will be asher tishma'u when you listen. You just have to listen and have the positive intentions, and Hashem will bless you, which will enable you to deliver. V'haklala, when will the curse come along? Im lo tishma'u, if you don't listen. And v'sartem min haderech, you turn away from the derech, and you do the wrong thing. The klala is only if you actively do the wrong thing. And then the Kli Yakar will finish off and reference just one other difference which we noticed here in over here. Sorry, I'm jumping a lot today. Umash amar asher tishma'u. When it comes to the brachot, we're told the brachot will come when you listen. V'lo amar im tishma'u. It doesn't say if you listen. Lichvodan shel Yisrael amar kain. This is said in our honor. כאילו אינן חשודים בעיניו שלא ישמעו ולא יקבלו עליהם לעשות מצוות השם ואפילו במחשבה כולי לא פקר. It's saying that it doesn't even enter Hashem's mind or the Torah mind that we won't have good intentions. Kule lo pakar. We're not going to be that ridiculous. We're not going to go off the derech that much. Obviously, we're going to have the right intentions. And the Torah says in confidence, it's not if you make the right choice. This is an empowering speech. When you make the right decisions, these will be the results. Umistama kol ish Yisrael, the assumption is that every Jew, yachshav lasot hamitzvah, will have positive intentions. Ki machshava kala me'od, because intentions are actually quite easy. So we can do that. L'chach amar, that's why it says, et bracha asher tishma'u, the blessing will come along when you listen. Ki yada Hashem, for Hashem knew, vadai shetishma'u, of course we're going to listen. V'tkablu bilvavchem la'asotan, and we're going to accept in our hearts to perform them. V'yishlach Hashem et bracha, then Hashem will send the bracha. K'dei she'al yadai yasur mimchem kol hamon'im shemibachutz. The bracha will remove any external factor which may act as a hurdle or a barrier to performing the mitzvot, to help us bring our good intentions to fruition. So this week's parasha presents us with a choice between good and bad. However, the fact that we have a choice between good and bad does not mean we can choose bad. We can't. We're supposed to choose the good. And we have to understand that our individual choices have an impact on the fate of the whole of Am Yisrael and the fate of the whole world around us. However, when it comes to making this choice, Hashem helps us. He guides us. He tells us what to choose. And more than that, if we even think about making the right choice, Hashem will bless us to help us go in that direction. So it's not really an equal choice of 50-50 between good and bad, because the Torah slants things in a direction to help us choose good and to encourage us to choose good and to help us move in that direction. We're going to look at something a bit technical before we come back to something a bit more psychological or emotional. All of this is an introduction, according to some understandings, to the blessings and curses which we will receive on Har Grizim and Har Eval. And we're told in source number 6, V'haya, and it should be, Ki v'yacha Hashem Elokecha el ha'aretz asher ata v'ashama l'rishta. When Hashem brings you to the land that you're coming there to inherit, let's remember Moshe Rabbeinu is going to pass away in a few weeks. He's not going to see this. He will see it, but he's not going to be there in person with us. And he's telling us what's going to happen. Then, v'natata et bracha al har Gerizim, you should place the bracha on har Gerizim, v'et haklala al har Eival, and the curses will be said on har Eival. Now you can go to the Shomron today, and you can visit har Gerizim and har Eival, and you can stand there between the mountains where this biblical passage takes place. Now, just in case you do get permission to go to Israel, and you fly there, and you need to know how to get there. If your phone's not working and you can't use Waze, well, maybe you'll think, you know what, I know it's in Parashat Re'eh. I'm going to open up the Chumash, and I'm going to use the Chumash to try and work out how to find Har Gerizim and Har Eival. So for you, there's the next pasuk in Pasuk Lamed. Halohema be'eive hayarden. They are on the other side of the Jordan. All right, you've already got that far. Acharei derech mavo hashemesh, after the way of the coming of the sun. Be'eretz haKnani hayoshev ba'arava, in the land of the Knani, dwelling in the Arava. Mul haGilgal, opposite the Gilgal, Eitzel Elonei Moreh, by Elonei Moreh. So you've got all these directions here, and you think to yourself, all right, this is in the Arava. I know that Tamara Bruce is involved in the Arava, and I know that's in the south of Israel. Let me go there. And you go to the Arava, and what are you going to discover? There's no Har Gerizim and no Har Eival in the Arava. So you think, all right, you get back in your bus, and you say, you know what, I'm going to go to the Gilgal. And you go to the Gilgal, and there's no Har Gerizim and there's no Har Eival there either. And it could be a little bit frustrating. So we have to understand this pasuk. The greatest challenge with this pasuk is that it's not necessarily geographically the way we understand the land of Israel today if we misunderstand the pasuk. So we have to understand how to understand the pasuk. But because the geography is so obviously not the way it can be understood here, that's what throws the door open for all types of remez and drash for people to explain what's going on here. So let's go to source number 7. First of all, before even relating to the geographical accuracy here, the Kli Yakar asks, why do we even need this? All these different signs and directions and points. Why do we even need directions in the Torah of how to find Har Gerizim and Har Eival? These are mountains with known names. Everybody knows where these mountains are. They're the mountains. You know, if you've got a little, orange juice shop at the bottom of the mountain, you need to find the mountain. Don't say, go to the orange juice shop and look up. It's a mountain. That's the clear sign. You don't need directions to find the mountain. The mountains are what they are, and they are where they are. So the Kli Yakar asks, why do we even need the Torah to provide us the directions to get to these mountains? Furthermore, he quotes the Gemara in Sotav, Masechet Sotah 33b. Mesik there, the Gemara concludes, Hayoshev ba'arava, dwelling in the Arava. He says, wait a second. Har Gerizim and Har Eival aren't in the Arava. They were in the mountainous, hilly region of Israel, not down in the Arava. Mul HaGilgal, opposite the Gilgal. They've never seen the Gilgal. You know, the art scroll for Mul HaGilgal translated as far away from the Gilgal, because it's nowhere near the Gilgal. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, no. This pasuk is not telling us where Har Gerizim and Har Eival are located. That's not the point. That cannot be the pshat of this pasuk, because it's not in the Arava and it's not in the Gilgal. So what is the pasuk telling us? Rather, it is giving us the correct advice of how to travel. It's not where they are, but it's how to travel. Number 1, derech, go on the major highways. Baderech lechu, go on the main roads. V'lo b'sadot v'chramim. It's telling us when you go to Har Gerizim and Har Eival, stick to the main roads. Don't go off in the fields and the vineyards. The word hayoshev, that dwells, what is telling us here in this pasuk is b'yeshuv lechu v'lo b'midbarot. Go in the populated areas and don't go in the wildernesses. Be'arava, when it tells us in the Arava, it's not talking about the region in Israel known as the Arava, but b'mishor lechu, it's telling us wherever possible to walk on the plains V'lo b'harim v'gvaot, don't take the hills and the mountains. So the Gemara explains that these directions in this week's parasha are not geographical landmarks. We don't need geographical landmarks for these mountains, and they aren't accurate geographical landmarks based on at least based on the modern names given to these places. It's not impossible that in Torah times these places had different names, but it's giving us directions of how to travel. But still the Kli Yakar isn't happy. At the top of page 3, and he asks, V'kasher ledvarav. We have to ask against this. Ma inyan zeh lahagrizim ve'eval. What's this general travel advice doing in the context of Har Grizim and Har Eval? This is very nice advice. Take main roads, stick to populated areas, take flat roads, don't go up mountains. But why in this week's parsha? In the context of Har Grizim and Har Eval. And therefore he says, V'altzad haremez yesh lefaresh. We have to explain this based on the side of remez. What we have here is a reference that the brachot are going to fall on 3 different groups of Jews when we choose the right path. So what we have here is a reference to 3 different groups. Kat Rishona, group number 1. These are the pure ones who go in the way of the Torah of Hashem. Morei ha'ora'ah b'Yisrael, the Torah teachers of Israel. Lahem amar, and to those saintly individuals it says, Baderech lechu, go on the derech. V'lo b'sadot v'kramim, and don't go on the fields or the vineyards. Kederech shelo haya l'kohanim chelek b'sadot v'kramim, it's saying the same way that Kohanim shouldn't have been working the land or working in vineyards. Kohanim are sanctified to work the avodat Hashem. Shelo yitrudim b'avodat hadama. Kohanim shouldn't be working the land. Elas siftei kohen yishmeru da'at v'torah yavakshu mepihu. That was at least the plan for the Kohanim, that they would be the Torah teachers for our nations. Therefore, he's saying the Torah teachers shouldn't go into the vineyards, shouldn't go in the fields. There's a group of Am Yisrael who need to dedicate themselves just to the derech, just to the way of Torah. V'ashkechan kol Torah de'ikri derech. The entire Torah is called a derech. We know this ourselves. If we talk about a certain individual who's gone off the derech, it means they've gone away from the way of Torah. And derech means the way of Torah. And therefore, group number 1, he's saying, the advice for certain members of Am Yisrael is stick to the derech of Torah, don't get involved in other things. Kat Shnia, group number 2. Heima Bale Batim. These are the good, normal Jews. Haoskim b'yeshuv ha'olam were involved in just positively impacting the world. Umachzikim yedei lomdei Torah, and they're the ones who financially support the Torah learnings. Lahem amar, to them it says, b'yeshuv lechu, you should go in the yeshuv. What does that mean? Shetamid yasukim b'dvarim shehem yeshuv ha'olam, be involved in productive activity which improves and settles the world. So option number 1 is go in the derech of Torah. If you're not going to be a full-time person in the derech of Torah study and that saintly activity, then go in the yeshuv, engage in productive activity. V'lo b'dvarim b'teilim, are not nonsense, divrei tohu and rubbish. Kamidbar, like a wilderness, makom tohu, which is just filled with emptiness and nothingness. Zeh shamar, that's why it says, v'lo b'midbarot, don't get involved in the nonsense. Kederech yoshvei, not like those corner dwellers. Asher kol masam u'matanem b'dvarim b'teilim v'lashon hara, that they just talk nonsense all day long and lashon hara. So option number 1 of how to live your life is to go on the derech of Torah, full-time Torah learning. Option number 2 is to be engaged in productive yeshuv ha'olam, being engaged with the world, but not to waste your time. Kach lishit, group number 3. Heim ha'balei srara, these are the people with power and authority. Malchei Yisrael, the Jewish kings, V'nisiyei kol dor v'dor manhigehem, and the princes of every generation and their leaders. Lahem amar, the warning to them is, shelo yarum levavam, don't become arrogant, rather, ba'arava yelchu, go in the plains, b'mishor, go along the flat path, v'lo b'harim v'gvaot, don't get too carried away with being high or lofty like mountains or hills. Lelech begdulot u'beniflaot, don't get carried away with going with all your greatness. Ela b'derech memutza, just go in an average way. K'derech sha'arava memutza ben har l'shvela, the same way that the arava lies in that average middle point between the mountain and the low regions. So the Kli Yakar explains in the world of Remez that these three travel tips, going on the derech, in the yeshuv, and in the arava, are addressing three different groups: those who need to stick to the derech and not get involved in work, those who need to focus on productive activity, and those who need to make sure that they don't get carried away with their titles or their position. We're now going to move away from the world of Remez into a fascinating insight in source number 8. There's so much which is taught from this one pasuk in Dvarim in source 8. The pasuk tells us, Banim atem laHashem Elokeichem. You are the children of Hashem, your God. As a result, lo titgodedu. Literally, this means you should not cut yourselves up. Now, this is also taught halachically to mean lo tasu agudot agudot. You're not allowed to splinter off into all different types of groups. And the halachic prohibition against breaking away from a community comes from this pasuk. Lo titgodedu, don't split off, don't cut yourselves up as a nation. But literally, what it's referring to here is self-harm. It is referring to cutting yourself as an extreme practice of mourning, which was practiced amongst other nations at the time. And as well, you can't put a bald spot between your eyes, lameit, as an act of mourning for someone who's passed away. So if we put to one side the halachic meaning of this pasuk, or the lovely meaning from the opening words, what it's really saying is, you're the children of Hashem. When you suffer loss, do not take your mourning to extreme levels, and do not engage in self-harm as part of that mourning process. And the Kli Yakar here, I think, is going to give some very valuable words about mourning. In source number 9, he tells us, Lo titgodedu, don't cut yourselves up, etc. He says, Lefi sheha'omot mitzta'arim kedin al davar aved asher holech velo yashuv. What lies at the heart of the non-Jewish mourning practices being referred to here? Why would people engage in such extreme measures? He says it's an expression of a sense, which would be a correct response, to something which is lost, which is never going to come back. It is when something is completely lost. Holech velo yashuv, no point of return. That is why there's an extreme response in the mourning. Aval ata lo chen, Hashem tells us that's not the way you should behave. Ki b'cha bachar Hashem liot lo le'am segula. Hashem chose us to be his am segula. And if we translate the word segula as a treasure, we are Hashem's treasure. V'chol segulat melachim, what is the king's treasure? Haynu davar shemachnisim la'otzar. That is something which is placed inside Hashem's treasure house. Kach HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what happens? So Hashem, machnis la'otzar, places inside his treasure house, nafshot hatzadikim hatahorot, the souls of the pure tzadikim. Ve'eno davar ha'aved, and therefore, when we lose somebody from this world, we don't believe that they're lost. What's happened to them? They have entered Hashem's treasure house where Hashem keeps the souls of the tzaddikim. And if that being the case, because we haven't lost something forever, why would we be so pained by something which still exists? Not only does he exist, but it's shining there, it's thriving there. The soul is in Hashem's treasure house. Okay, their sun has set on this individual in this world. He's eating his truma in the eternal world. So what the Kli Yakar is saying is as follows. What perspective do we need in order to avoid extreme responses to loss? It is the perspective that we haven't truly lost something, or something has not been lost forever, because in fact it's in a better place, it's in a purer place, it's with Hashem, basking in the glory of the rays of the Shekhinah. This is the first part of the Kli Yakar's commentary. At the same time, if you have somebody who is suffering grief or suffering loss, to come along to them and say, you know, they're in a better place. I know people who are suffering grief and loss say that as well, and it could be a source of chizuk. But sometimes it's not necessarily going to lift the individual, and there could sometimes be a sense of guilt attached when you do feel completely broken, or when you do feel completely thrown or lost, or anger or pain and a sense of grief when a person has passed on from this world. And based on what the Kli Yakar has said so far, what he said so far is, why are you pained? You know, it's almost as if it's not justified to feel pain, which is why I think the continuation of the Kli Yakar is so valuable here, because the Kli Yakar doesn't stop there, but he continues. And he says, V'chazal Amru, our sages told us in the Gemara in Shabbat, that Hamorid Dma'ot al Adam Kasher, if anybody brings down, if anybody tears, if anyone cries for a good person, Hakadosh Baruch Hu Sofran, Hashem counts them, meaning he counts those tears, Umenichan Beveit Gnazav, Hashem keeps those tears in his special treasure house. Shne'emar, as it says in Tehillim, Perek Nunvav, Pasuk Tet, Nodi Safarta, you've counted my wanderings. Ata Sima Dimati Benotcha, you have placed my tears in your flask, or Hashem, please place my tears in your flask. Hala b'sifartecha, are these not things that you count? So there's a concept of Hashem counting tears and keeping them in his special flask. Vahatam, why does Hashem keep our tears for those who've passed away in a special place? The reason the Kli Yakar says is because Lefi shegam hanefashot heim skula v'otzar, because those souls themselves are a segula. They are treasured. They're kept in Hashem's special treasure house. Al kain, therefore, sham yu gamad ma'ot bebeit ginzlav. That is where the tears are kept, in a special place. Why? Those tears belong together with those who've passed away. So he says the reason why Hashem stores the tears for tzaddikim in his treasure house is because that's where those tzaddikim are, and therefore that is where those tears belong. And he goes on to say, Umasha Amar, when it says, Halo b'sifartecha, Hashem, you count these tears. Lashon bilti muvan. At first glance, we can't understand that expression. Omer ani shekach pirusho, I'm going to say as follows. Ki ma shakadosh baruch hu motzianu machnisan b'mispar kochavim. When we talk about Hashem taking out his host of stars in and out b'mispar, by number, why is it relevant that Hashem counts his stars? Zemore al chashivutan. It shows their significance. Ki kol davar chashuv yesh lo mispar. Everything important has a number. Like we say in English, something counts. When we say that something counts, it means that it is significant. Why? Something which you count has significance. Al kain, therefore, natan tam al sfirat nodo. That's why the explanation is given that Hashem counts the contents of his flask. V'simat hadma'ot benod, and placing those tears in his flask. Oh, sorry, Sfirat Nodah, counting our wanderings and placing those tears in his flask. V'amar and Tehillim, it says, Halo b'sifartecha, Hashem, you count these tears. Ratzaloma, which means, Halo gam heima ba'atzmam heim b'sifartecha. In English, we would say, those tears count. Shata motzianu machnisan b'mispar, you take them out and you count them, uchmoihem, and similarly, you gamad ma'ot gnuzim v'nisparim, like those that you take out to count because you treasure. These tears are treasured tears before you. You keep them in a special place. Al kain, therefore, ein nachon lasum karcha beinechem lamet. When somebody passes away, it's not appropriate to place a bald spot between your eyes. What does the concept of a bald spot between your eyes represent? Ki hakorcha shebein ha'einayim, that bald spot between the eyes, mora, suggests ki'ilu hayud ma'ot kreichim, as if those tears are kireach, which can also mean to turn into ice, to congeal, va'avodim, and lost. This concept of the bald spot between the eyes is an expression of the tears lacking value. Because if something is lost from the world entirely, there's no point crying over it. If something has no future, what's the point crying over it? So there's that pain and anguish and an extreme response, and the response itself lacks value. But that's not the way we should respond with our mourning. That's not the case. No. Those tears themselves are kept somewhere precious. And I think what the Kli Yakar does here is he has a beautiful balance between, on the one hand, saying that our mourning should not be extreme, and people are in a better place when they leave this world, and they are with Hashem, and they are in his treasure house, and their souls are treasured on the one hand. But at the same time, you shouldn't feel guilty when you cry for such individuals and cry in pain or grief or loss, because those tears are validated, and those tears are cherished, and those tears are treasured as well. And the concept that a soul is in a better place does not mean that we have to feel any guilt when we cry in this world. It is okay to cry, and in fact, those tears are very precious before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I think these comments of the Kli Yakar here are very nicely balanced and poised, which is what the Torah is telling us. Don't cut yourself up, and don't act as if your tears themselves lack value. The soul which has passed away is still cherished and shining and thriving, and your response, if it's not an extreme response, has great value before Hashem. He goes on to give one more explanation before we look at another concept. We can also explain it as follows. If you cry for a good person when they've left this world, those tears are stored before Hashem. Mistama. It's fair to assume. Hamitzta'er al ha'eder kisharon ha'ma'aseh harehu yarei Elokim. Anybody who genuinely feels a source of pain over lost potential in this way is someone who fears God. V'chetiv, and it says, Yirat Hashem hi otzro, the fear of Hashem is Hashem's treasure house. Meaning, if you're genuinely pained by the loss of goodness from this world, and that comes from a place of Yirat Shamayim, that sense of Yirat Shamayim is really valuable. Hainu otzro shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's Hashem's treasure house. Ki eino sin otzar, ki im davar she'eino benimtza. What do you treasure? You only put things in your treasure house which are rare. And true Yirat Shamayim is something which is rare. Why? Because as we know, Ki hakol bidei shamayim chutz mi Yirat Shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven apart from the fear of heaven. So when we display true Yirat Shamayim, that is a treasured commodity which is kept in a special place before Hashem. Al kein HaKadosh Baruch Hu meiniach et hadma'ot bebeit ganazav. That's why Hashem keeps those tears in his special place. Now, a large focus of this week's parasha is going to be how we care for the poor. And source number 10, Aser Ta'aser, which sometimes is our introduction to Yom Tov Laning, kicks off this topic in source number 10. And we say, Aser Ta'aser, you should surely tithe. It calls Tvuat Zarecha, all the produce of your seeds, Hayotzeh Hasadeh Shana Shana, which goes out to the field each year. And the Kli Yakar in source number 11 points out that we have many double expressions when it comes to the act of tzedakah. When the Torah talks about tzedakah, it uses double expressions. Aser ta'aser, you should surely tithe. Naton titen, you should surely give. Patoach tiftach, you should surely open up your hand. Va'avet tavitenu, you should surely loan. In each of these cases, we have the infinitive construct followed by the infinitive absolute, or what we call double expressions. V'chein haschar kaful, and not only are the actions expressed as double actions, the reward is also a double expression. Ki barech yivarechecha, Hashem will surely bless you. Why is it that when it comes to acts of giving in the section of the Torah, they are presented with double expressions? Al kain kol inyanei hatzdaka kfulim. All matters of tzedakah are doubled up because they need to be achat beyad va'achat belev. There's the element of tzedakah which is in your hand, the external physical act of giving. And there's the element of tzedakah, which is what is in your heart, the emotional care and support and connection, which is part of tzedakah as well. Hashem rewards us separately for the two sides of tzedakah, the financial side of tzedakah and the psychological side of tzedakah. There's two sides to tzedakah which we have to perform, and as a result we receive a double bracha as well. That's why it says, Ki barech yivarechecha, Hashem will truly bless you. Which means when we consider tzedakah, tzedakah is not just about a bottom line and a financial statement. Tzedakah, that which you do in the hand, needs to be matched with the emotional and psychological support which you provide for the poor person. That encouragement can go a long way, perhaps even further than the financial gift that you give them, the other side of tzedakah. Davar acher, another explanation. Kol hakfulot ba'u lomar. It actually comes to tell you, she'im natan pam achat, if you give tzedakah once, tizker liten gam pam sheni, you will merit to also give tzedakah on another occasion. Ki netina goreret netina. One act of giving encourages another act of giving, v'chein kulam. It's like in the kotel. If you give tzedakah to one person at the kotel, and then that's noticed, then lots of other people are going to come to you, and Baruch Hashem, you're blessed with many opportunities to give tzedakah, just one after the other. Or if you give tzedakah to somebody at your front door, it is likely that your address will now be on a list of homes where it is worthwhile knocking on that front door. Nitina goreret nitina. And how blessed are we? Unfortunately, we don't have shluchim coming into our country nowadays for tzedakah. How lucky we were when we lived at a time where the ability to give tzedakah was on our doorsteps. Like Deliveroo, you can get food to your doorsteps. The mitzvah of tzedakah used to come to our doorsteps, and we were able to perform it straight away. And one act of giving just led to another act of giving. Be'ezrat Hashem, we will return to those days soon as well. But he says, giving leads to giving as well. The final thing I'd like to look at today is source number 12 and 13, again in the context of the distribution of Hashem's blessing when it comes to wealth in this world. Because in source number 12, we're told, Naton titen lo. This is how the person who is wealthier needs to respond to the poor individual. You should surely give to him. V'lo yera levavcha, your heart should not be bad, betitcha lo, when you give to him. Why should we have a positive attitude when it comes to tzedakah? Ki biglal hadavar hazeh yavarchecha Hashem Elokecha b'chol ma'asecha v'chol mishlach yadecha. It is because of this that Hashem has blessed you. Hashem, your God, has blessed you with all of your actions and all of your achievements. Don't be cold-hearted, closed-minded, stingy when it comes to tzedakah. Why do you think you've been blessed in this way? You are in this world as a conduit of Hashem's bracha, and Hashem has placed this wealth in your hands in order to distribute it to others. That is why Hashem made you successful in the first place. And in source number 13, the Kli Yakar tells us, let's remember the Kli Yakar was a very poor individual. And he tells us in source number 13, Ki biglala davar hazeh yavarchecha Hashem. This is why Hashem has blessed you. Chazal, our sages, tell us in the Gemara in Shabbat, page 151b. Lamdum min lashon biglal. Our sages taught us from the word biglal, because shegalgal hu shechozer ba'olam. Fortune is a wheel, a galgal, which goes around in the world. It is the wheel of fortune. V'rabim tamhu al hasham, but he says many people asked against this Gemara. Ki biglal, the word biglal means because. Eino lashon galgal. Biglal's not galgal. Glal is glal, and galgal is galgal. Sharei gimal achat chasera. Galgal has two gimels. Biglal has one gimel. Nice drasha, but they're two different words. So he says, what are we going, it's a lovely concept, but how do you get from the word biglal to galgal, a wheel? But Omerani, he says, I'm going to explain as follows. He says that what Chazal are doing is they're explaining the word Gilgal based on the phrase, like in Breshit, they would roll the stone. Biglal means because of, it is a rolling consequence. So one thing happens as a result of the other. V'ratzal Omar, what it means is as follows. What's going to happen is that poverty is going to roll between people from one to the other. That's just the way the world works. As when that happens, Yivarechecha Hashem, Hashem will bless you. Hashem will bless you that when poverty is rolling around, it's not going to fall on you. Bin Pol on Hashem when it falls on people. So as a result of it rolling around, it becomes like a wheel going around the world. So what the Kli Yakar does just linguistically is that he draws the connection between Biglal and Galgal by bridging it, by telling us that Golel means to roll, like Glila in Hagba and Glila. So Biglal is for something that rolls around. And because it rolls around, it becomes a Galgal in the world. But we're not jumping from Biglal to Galgal. There's another word in the middle to make the connection. But once we put the linguistic thing to the side, let's pay attention to what he's telling us here in terms of the content. Shekol noten sofo liot mekabel, says the Kli Yakar. Everyone who's on the giving side is going to end up at some stage being on the receiving end. Shebachol hanimtzaim holech hadavar b'sivuv kegalgal, and the three dots, I missed out quite a Kabbalistic section. And he says that everything in the world goes around and operates in cycles. Everything in this world, not just humans, everything in the world receives and gives. Bilti Hashem levado, apart from Hashem himself, hu hanotenu bilti mekabel, only Hashem only gives without receiving anything in return. So he says everybody's going to end up needing to be on the receiving end. You can say that it's not just a financial comment, that everybody will need help from other people at some stage, but he views this as being financial, looking at the much, much bigger picture. He says the reasoning is as follows. Hashem never wanted us to achieve permanent dwelling and stronghold on the land. Like it says, the land shouldn't be sold permanently. That's why I have the concept of Yovel, to return properties. And the person will forget that the world belongs to Hashem. Hashem doesn't want us to overemphasize the permanence of our presence here. Al-Kain HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mesavev, Hashem leads things. Shekol Adam Balidei Midazo, Ohu Ozaro. He says everybody's going to experience poverty, whether it is you or your children. So the way the Kli Yakar understands this is, it doesn't mean that every individual is going to experience poverty. What he's saying is that every family at some stage in history, whether this generation or the next generation, is going to experience poverty. Leida ulahodia, in order to know and let it be known. Kikulam kigerim ala aretz. None of us are the masters of this world. V'la Hashem teval umlo'ah. Everything truly belongs to Hashem. And he says, this is how you explain the pasuk at the end of benching Kamosh Ne'emar, as it says in Tehillim, Perek Lamed Zayin pasuk Chavvav, V'lo ra'iti tzadik ne'ezav v'zaro mevakesh lachem. In Tehillim we say, I've never seen a righteous person forsaken and their children asking for bread. Now sadly, we have seen righteous people, great tzaddikim, who've been forsaken and their children asking bread. So how can we say on our full stomachs after our meals, I've never seen a tzaddik and their children asking for bread? Ratzal Omar, the Kli Yakar explains, Hu v'zaro. I've never seen consecutive generations stay in a position of poverty. Meaning, yes, one generation might be experiencing poverty, but then the next generation it'll pick up. Because you won't see it in continuous generations. Ela ohu ozaro, it'll be one generation or the other. The Kli Yakar says this is just the way of the world. Sometimes we'll be doing better, sometimes we'll be doing worse. And if Hashem has blessed you that you're on the up, it's a privilege and an opportunity for you to share his blessings with other individuals. That is why he's given you with that blessing, blessed you that way. V'yesh omrim, and some people explain, and with this we'll conclude, Chisaron Gimel b'milat Biglal. We said, Biglal doesn't mean Galgal. Galgal, wheel, has an extra Gimel. He says, we learn from the missing Gimel. Lomar, it comes to teach us, Shazen nimshach mi'avon miniyat gemilut chesed. It's because you're missing the Gimel in your life. What Gimel are you missing in your life? Gemilut chesadim, loving kindness. The Chisaron HaGimel Ledalim. If you like this stuff, look up the three dots. I've missed out lots of Kabbalistic and extra word and number games. V'chisaron hagimel ledalim, the lack of the gimel, which you're giving to the poor people, misavev hagalgal, is what keeps the wheel of fortune going. So if you're on the up or you're on the way up and you want to stay there, make sure you have lots of gimel. Behave with lots of gimilut chasadim, and then Bezrat Hashem, Hashem will keep you there and look after you there. But I do think that the Kli Yakar, who suffered from terrible poverty himself, and when he writes about these things, I think he's consoling himself to a certain extent. He says, you know what? Poverty exists. It is part of the world. He's, you know, if it hits one generation, then hopefully it won't hit the next generation. And we just have to behave with Gemilut Chasadim and hope that Hashem will bless us all. I wish you all a wonderful day and a great week. I'd like to say hello to Naomi as well. I don't see everybody who comes to the shiurim, but if your screens are on, it's more likely that you're going to appear on my screen. So hello to Naomi in America. What time is it for you there?
8 in the morning, 8 at night.
What time is it?
Unmute,
8:30. 8:30 at night. It's 8:30 at night.
Well, I hope
Sunday
everybody
night.
Sleep well.
Sunday.
And well, you've got a few hours of productivity left anyway.
Yeah.
All right, and we all do. Okay, everyone have a great day. Good to see you all.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone. A good week. See you.
Thank you.
To me, yeah.